And so we're going to talk a lot today, as I'll put some things on the board, and you will tell me, and I will know from your thinking how you shop. And at the end, we can look at how we spend our money, why we eat the things we eat, and hopefully we might have a better idea of how to shop and how to eat and how to feed our bodies well. I will start once again with the list we had last night of those nutrients that are absolutely vital for health. When anyone is missing, then we are liable to get sick. Carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, fiber, water, minerals, and phytochemicals. Phytochemicals meaning substances found only in plants. Have I left out anything? All right. And in shopping, I want to look at our shopping largely under the heading of plant foods, and flesh foods, in the broadest sense. Carbohydrates. What does carbohydrates do for you? Mainly, energy. It's the greatest source of energy. Fats produce energy, proteins energy, carbohydrates energy, but this provides the most easily available, the most economic source of energy. Ultimately, every cell in the body uses glucose. Whatever you eat, apart from ketone bodies, every cell in the body converts all foods to glucose. So if you lived only on protein, it would be turned to glucose. Fat is turned to glucose. But the pathways of conversion of fats or proteins back to glucose is very complicated and very expensive and uses up a lot of energy. Whereas carbohydrate, which comes with glucose or fructose, is already available for immediate oxidation by the tissues. Carbohydrates, plant, flesh foods. Those who buy plant foods and those who buy flesh foods, and of course there are some who eat both. As we buy, share with me what they contain. Carbohydrates, plant. Remember, energy. And our food, basically, should be about 65 to 70% carbohydrates, and the rest, as we shared last night, broken down to the others. What about plants and carbohydrate? Do they contain any? Little bit? Much? Potatoes? Pumpkins, yams, rice, wheat. What about leaves? Leaves. Yes. They do contain carbohydrates? Yes. Because whatever comes in the root, whatever comes at the end of the plant tree, whether yams or potatoes, the potato itself was manufactured in the leaf and then travels down the stem to be stored in the tuber. So that plant foods certainly contain carbohydrates, and so we'll put plus, plus, plus. Flesh foods. Just want to know if you know what you're eating and why you buy the things you buy. Billy? A lot of
kinds of meats that contain that, but this is also animal based.
Yes.
Like cows,
Yes.
sheep. It's got a lot of carbohydrates to be absorbed, but not necessarily that which your body can absorb.
Not necessarily carbohydrates that your body can absorb. Animal food contains really only a little carbohydrate. A little. Not a lot. Because in what form is carbohydrate stored in animal? Now, fat is not carbohydrate. Remember, fat is a source of energy, but we're talking strictly of starch. All plant food contains carbohydrate in the form of starch. And starch really is a chain of glucose molecules joined together, which may be straight chains or they may be branched chains. And when the starch molecule is being broken down, it is much easier for the enzymes which break down your glycogen to glucose. It's much easier for them to break them when there are multiple chains. But when there's a long chain, they are more resistant. So there are starches which come in branched chains or in long chains, but ultimately they are broken down to glucose. What about fruit? What kind of sugar is in fruit? Fructose. Tell me the others that you know. All right, lactose. Lactose is in fruit or in plants? No, lactose equals glucose plus galactose. Two sugars. Sucrose. Where do you find sucrose? Cane sugar, beet sugar, potato sugar. What is sucrose? Glucose plus fructose. We'll come to glycogen in a moment. Mannose, those are the main sugars in our food, equals glucose plus glucose. So these disaccharides, saccharides, sugars, these disaccharides in the intestines are broken down to monosaccharides, and each of these disaccharides always end up producing glucose, and in the body, fructose and galactose are themselves converted to glucose. So in the end, all forms of starch you eat, whether they be two sugars, a disaccharide, lactose in milk, sucrose in sugar, mannose in potatoes and wheat. All of these are broken down to monosaccharides, the main one being glucose, and the others are converted in the body to glucose. So ultimately, all carbohydrates in the body is converted to glucose, which is the substance that the cells use. In the body, whether animal or human, we do not have starch, but carbohydrates is stored as glycogen. These are collections of glucose molecules stored in animal. And in the body, it is rapidly broken down to glucose to provide the energy for all the cells. And glycogen is stored mainly in muscle, any kind of muscle in the body, and in the liver, and in the kidney. So animal food contains some carbohydrates in the form of glycogen stored largely in those tissues. Proteins. Plant. Any protein? A little bit of protein? A lot of protein? All right, depends on the plant. Let's think about legumes. 50-50? Sorry? I don't know that one.
Quinoa is a grain. Thanks for perfect proteins.
Quinoa. All right. I'm going to put down here grains. Grains, oats, wheat, millet, rye, etc., etc. Grains. Proteins? I'm not sure. Not sure. Tell me some of the prejudices you've battled.
Nuts have proteins.
Nuts, right?
Don't all plants or fruits have some sort of amino acid?
Good, all right. All plants have protein. All plants. Poor quality? Incomplete? First class or second class? Have you come across these terms? If you want first class protein, where would you go for it? Plants? What about the animal lovers? I'm so glad to see that among this group, those old-time myths have died. For at one time, it used to be said that there is first-class protein and a second-class protein. And it used to be said that in animal food, there was lots of first-class protein and vegetables were the source of second-class protein or incomplete. Now, of course, that is quite mythical. A protein, as we talked about the other night, is made up of amino acids. So each one is an amino acid, and the protein is a long chain of amino acids. The body cannot use protein, and so the enzymes cut the protein into its appropriate amino acids. Among the amino acids, there are about 8 which are essential. And the others are non-essential. What does that mean? Essential amino acids. All right? It really means your body cannot make them. You must get them from the diet. And if you don't get these, you will become sick. The non-essential doesn't mean that you can do without them, but that the body can make these non-essential ones from the pool of amino acids maintained within your body. As the body breaks down the proteins, all the amino acids are stored in the pool. And when the cell wishes to synthesize or manufacture its own protein, it pulls out from the pool the appropriate amino acids, sends them to the ribosomes, and under the direction of the gene, the body creates its own protein. So it doesn't matter how complete your protein is when you eat it. It is reduced to its bare essentials, reabsorbed as amino acids, and then the body synthesizes its own. It therefore used to be said that only foods which contained all of these amino acids are first class. But the reality is, whether you eat it in plant or in animal form, all of these are reduced to amino acids, and as long as you eat food which provides these, you will be nutritionally well. But we do know that all of these essential amino acids which the body cannot make, all of them are found in plants, and all of them are found in animal. And as long as you eat a variety of plant foods, you will have all of the essential amino acids which are vital to health. If you eat animal, of course, you have lots of them. If you eat plant, you have them available in large enough quantities to keep you healthy. Therefore, whether you have them in legumes, beans and peas, or in grains, the variety of grains and lentils and split peas, all the different legumes we have, soya beans, or in nuts, you do not need to be afraid that you'll be lacking in amino acids, as long as you have a variety. And you don't have to eat all the different plants to get it. Just eat a wide variety in sufficient quantities, and you'll have all that you need. So nowadays, we no longer speak of incomplete protein and first class or second class, for the body doesn't make that distinction as long as they get foods containing those amino acids. Therefore, protein plus, 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 plus. Remember, what does protein do to you? It builds. It repairs. If you eat too much, more than your body needs, some of the protein is then stored as fat. But the rest of it goes to the liver on the right side of your body. The protein goes into the liver. It is broken down to urea, and then it is sent out by the kidneys as waste. But in producing urea, the breakdown of protein also produces acids, because proteins contain sulfur and phosphorus. And when those are broken down, you form hydrochloric sulfuric acid, and you form phosphoric acid. These acids in order to be secreted, need a partner. For the acids are secreted as negatively charged particles, and the kidney cannot secrete negatively charged particles, so they have to be married to a positively charged particle. In that way, these acids become neutral. Then they are excreted. These positively charged particles may either be sodium, potassium, or calcium. And so the more acid you have to be secreted from the breakdown of protein, the more of these positive charges you need to enable them to be excreted to make the uric acid. And so the body tends to call upon the bones and remove the calcium from the bones to excrete them with the acids. So the bones quietly lose their calcium. And as time goes on, as the bones become depleted of calcium, what then do you develop? Osteoporosis. So the bones become weak, easily fractured, bone pain. And that is what happens to many people as they get older, fall down the step, fall on the flat, break the hip, osteoporotic, and then that immobilizes them in bed, and soon they die from pneumonia or clots in the veins which go to the lungs because the bones are osteoporotic. One statement. So the more protein you eat, which is beyond your body's needs, the more you call upon the energy, the ATP in your energy stores to provide the energy to break down the protein and then to take away the calcium from the bones to eliminate the acid in the protein, because remember, we want the blood to remain slightly alkaline at a pH of 7.4. The neutral point being 7, and anything below 7 being acidic. Therefore, people who eat a lot of animal food for the enjoyment of the protein will tend to develop acidosis. But the thing is also true here. So don't eat too much protein. But in a sense, it doesn't matter where the protein comes from, whether it's plant or animal, the protein is the same, and the amino acids are the same. Question?
I am sitting and wondering as to what extent the foods that we eat, particularly the plant foods, their goodness, to what extent is it compromised by the controversy that is brought about by the usage of pesticides?
All right. How do pesticides affect the integrity of the proteins in the plants? Pesticides do not enter into the structure of the plant or interfere with the manufacture of protein. Pesticides reside on the plant, and as you eat the pesticide on the plant, then it will disturb your health. But it isn't incorporated into the structure of the plant. And that is why we need to wash the plants very well. And if we wash it very well, painstakingly well, then pesticides, the problem of that should be minimized. So much now for protein. Legumes, grains, and nuts are filled with protein. So is animal food. And they're roundabout equal. Carbohydrate for energy. Protein for building up.
You mentioned your matchbox. That's something matchbox.
Yes?
Is the matchbox the same for plant as for flesh?
The matchbox in terms of quantity, protein, is the same. It's just that you need to eat more plant a greater volume of plant as opposed to a little bit of meat, because the protein in meat is so much more concentrated because of the presence or the absence of other things which we will speak about. So if you took a matchbox of legumes, you wouldn't get sufficient as if you took a matchbox of animal.
How many matchboxes of butter beans?
Now, I'd have to think about that carefully and look at butter beans. You need more, but I can't tell you precisely how much you will need. But certainly not a bucket full.
Is it better to eat organic as opposed to non-organic?
Is it organic versus non-organic? Well, organically grown foods certainly contain greater concentrations of all nutrients. That is true. And so if one can get it in an organic way, fine. The problem is that it's just so much more expensive. If your pocket can allow you, good. If your pocket doesn't allow you, you will not suffer. You will get enough. So one thing I should say, animal carbohydrates really contain glycogen. Animal does not contain starch, but plants contain starch. And monosaccharides, but both starch and glycogen are simply collections of glucose. Now fats. Plant? Yes. Plant sterols. What kind of fats does the plant contain? Unsaturated, good. Let's look at the different fats. Saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated. That's a fat molecule, a lipid molecule. You know that all fat molecules are chains of carbon, long chains, 16, 18, 20. Every carbon has 4 arms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. When these single bonds or single arms are present, we say that all the arms of each carbon atom is filled up, occupied, or saturated with hydrogen. As the carbons link arms together, joined to hydrogen and joined to its fellow carbon. So all of those bonds between these carbons are single. This molecule is saturated. Nothing else can join it. But in some fats, that arm is not filled with anything. And so how many arms? 1, 2, 3, 4. It has a spare arm. Now, if a hydrogen should join that arm would be here. But if that hydrogen is not here, then we have a double bond. That molecule is monounsaturated. Only one carbon has a double bond. If there are many, more than one, that is a polyunsaturated fat. 2 carbons, more than one, poly, which is not saturated, that is, all the arms are not occupied with another chemical. Animal fats have a lot of saturated fat. All the arms are filled. Vegetable has a lot of polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated fats have just one double bond. Good. All lipid molecules have differing proportions of saturated, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated. All lipid molecules. And the body needs each of these. You cannot do without any one, but you need them in the right proportions. Olive oil, almonds, avocado, those are filled with monounsaturated. Excellent sources. Vegetable oils are a great source of poly. And animal are a great source of saturated. But all fat contains differing proportions. So that in olive oil, this portion would be very large. This portion would be very small. And this portion would also be large, but this is the greatest portion. In animal, this portion of saturated would constitute the greatest proportion of the fat, and the others are present in smaller amounts, while in vegetable oils, the polyunsaturated section would be the largest entity. What is the effect of these different acids on your body? To understand that, remember, we are dealing in our body with cholesterol. Cholesterol is necessary to build the membrane of your cells. We couldn't live without cholesterol, but our liver makes all the cholesterol we need. There is no cholesterol in plant. Cholesterol is only found in animal. So those who eat plant make their own cholesterol, and those who eat animal make their own cholesterol plus the animal cholesterol. And then the body now has to decide what to do with it. Now, in cholesterol, we have 2 types, HDL and LDL. 2 types. Both are necessary, but in the right quantities. And so we call the HDL good, and the LDL we call bad only when it is present in large quantities. But we need it in health. Saturated fats increases our bad cholesterol. And the bad cholesterol, depending on how you cook it, frying, barbecue, is turned into free radicals. Because the LDL, due to the method of cooking, acquires an extra electron. And it is this one that gets deposited in the blood vessels around the organs and gives rise to strokes, heart attacks, gangrene of the legs, as well as fatty organs around the liver. It is this one that kills. So if you want a lot of LDL, then we will eat saturated fats. If we eat vegetable fat, which is polyunsaturated, this reduces total cholesterol. But in reducing the total cholesterol, which is good, it really reduces HDL as well as LDL. So the vegetable fats would be excellent if it just produced a drop in your total cholesterol but left your HDL normal. Unfortunately, it lowers total cholesterol by reducing both the good one and the bad one. It's good to reduce the bad one, but it is not good to reduce the good one. So, in eating vegetable oils, one should not eat a lot. Minimize it, for we don't need a lot of fat in our foods. And we certainly don't want to eat saturated fats because we already make it in our body. The olive oil, almonds, and avocado make monounsaturated fats. And the monounsaturated fats leave the LDL normal and greatly reduces the LDL. So that overall, the total cholesterol goes down, which is good, but it leaves the good cholesterol intact and it reduces the bad cholesterol. So that people who live in the Mediterranean, who eat a lot of olive oil, they hardly get heart attacks and strokes because they have very little LDL. But because they eat so much of it, they become fat. So when you eat the right amount of monounsaturated, you have these beneficial effects, lowering of the bad, the good remains normal. And if you eat the right quantity, you will not become obese. If you eat too much, then you'll have good cholesterol levels, but you will have obesity. Vegetable fats, don't eat too much because you're going to get a lowering of both. And your low cholesterol level, though it is good, it fools you because it is lowering your HDL as well. And the saturated fats is just bad news. Lots of LDL, free radical formation, and a greater incidence of heart attacks and strokes. So now, with that understanding, let us see what we will have on our chart. Fats, plants have sterols, and the body uses the sterols to make good things. Flesh foods has an overabundance of saturated fats, particularly LDL, which predisposes to blood vessel disease. Under fats, we will have a subheading, cholesterol. Plants, 0. Animal foods, lots. It is not good to have a diet rich in cholesterol, for the body doesn't need it. And the more you eat, the more you buy, the more you're shortening your life. It may taste nice, but it takes its toll sooner or later. Vitamins. Animal. Vitamins are necessary for life. Without them, you simply die. We'll review them in a moment. You cannot do without vitamins, but you need them in small quantities. They just keep you alive, and they have all kinds of functions in the body. Before we look at what is contained in the different foods, let's have a quick review of the vitamins which are necessary for healthy living, and without which you get disease. We have the vitamins which are soluble in water. And so those vitamins soluble in water occupy all the water space in your cells. Wherever there's water, they find them there, for they are soluble. And then we have the fat soluble or the water insoluble vitamins. Now those go where there is fat. For fat needs vitamins to do their job, and water-based cells needs vitamins to do their jobs. What are the soluble vitamins that we need for health? Help me. Vitamin B and vitamin C. Those are the two. When you don't have the vitamin B molecules, basically you get all kinds of neurological problems. For in general terms, the B vitamins maintain the health of brain and nerves. Vitamin B1, when you don't have that, then your muscles degenerate, you go into heart failure. They call it beriberi. I won't go through all of them, just the major ones, although all are important. Vitamin B12, when you don't have that, your brain is destroyed, your nerves are destroyed, and your bone marrow cannot make red blood cells. So you become anemic, and neurologically, you become paralyzed and blind. Folic acid, you need that for the growth of cells, for brain function, and without folic acid, you have many problems. And that goes for all the B vitamin lines. Vitamin C, found in a wide variety of fruits, wide variety, with the greatest concentration probably in guavas or cherries, but they're found in all citrus. Without vitamin C, then you cannot make the collagen, the connective tissue, the substance in your skin and bones and tissues that give it strength. And when the collagen is disturbed, then you bleed, your teeth fall out, and all kinds of nasty things happen to you. And you get scurvy. The fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, and vitamin E. Vitamin A makes you see, makes you grow, reproductive health. Vitamin D, calcium, bones, teeth. Vitamin K, your blood clots. No vitamin K, you bleed to death. Vitamin E functions as a powerful antioxidant. Together with vitamin C, a powerful antioxidant. And vitamin A is also a powerful antioxidant in addition to being vitamins. So those are the main vitamins that we need to keep us well. Vitamins. Animal? Which ones? All right, B12. Excellent source of B vitamins. B6, not sure. I know it's in grains and nuts, but animal, I don't know. Main vitamins in flesh? For the absorption of calcium and A. Plant? Everything. Not so much vitamin D, for although vitamin D is not in the plant, where do we get our vitamin D from? The sun. As long as you have sunshine, you don't need really to eat vitamin D. 15 minutes of sun every day, and you have all the vitamin D you wish.
Wasn't there a big controversy for years that you couldn't get vitamin B12?
Yes, there is. I don't want to go into that one at the moment. That's a big subject in itself. And I'll leave that for another time, but it's a very important point. But that will that's a very special side issue, which is still not yet resolved. So I'll just leave that for the time being. So the plant has in really lots and lots. All the vitamins you need are there. These are restricted to that. Good sources. Excellent in everything. No proof yet that one is present in the form that the body needs it. There are forms of vitamin B12 that are present, but they are not known to be metabolically usable by the body. And so the jury is still out on that one. But although the jury is still out, we have to remember that in communities in the world who never eat animal, never, then they don't get signs of B12 deficiency. They're very healthy. So they must get it from somewhere. And certainly it is not from animal. And though we have not found the source in plant, the fact is that as scientists and doctors, we're only touching the edge of knowledge. And there are lots of things about the body that we simply don't know. And perhaps one day in the future, we'll find out why it is that communities and ethnic groups who never eat animal don't develop B12 deficiency any greater than those who eat animal. Suffice it to say, excellent source of vitamins, limited source, but what it does have, it has in great abundance. Fiber. What basically does fiber do? The body cannot digest fiber. Only animals digest fiber. But fiber is simply a compound. I'll call it a string. Goes into the stomach. It is destined to pass through to the other end. What good does it do? As the fiber comes into the body, it absorbs water. And as the fiber absorbs water, so it expands. And that is the swollen fiber. And as the fiber swells up, it distends the intestines and the stomach. And the stomach feels full. So fiber prevents you from overeating. It limits the amount you eat. But if there were no fiber to swell up by absorbing water, you'd have to eat larger quantities of food to feel full. And the more food you eat, the fatter you will become. Now, in the fiber, the foods that contain fiber carry with it sugar. But before the sugar can be absorbed into the bloodstream, it has to be detached from the fiber. to become free so that it may be absorbed, because fiber containing sugar cannot be absorbed. But it takes time to release the sugar by the process of digestion, and because the sugar is released from the fiber slowly, therefore the rise of the sugar in the blood is very slow. So you never have a high blood sugar. But if there were no fiber there, then the rate of absorption of the sugar would be so high that the blood concentrations would go like that. So you would have a very high blood sugar. And the higher the level of blood sugar, because there was no fiber, the more the pancreas, which is lying behind the stomach, the greater the stimulation to the pancreas by the high levels of sugar, and so the pancreas pours out a lot of insulin, very high, to bring down the high blood sugar. But when the blood sugar finally comes down, there is so much insulin in the blood that the blood sugar level goes right down. And you become hypoglycemic, and you get headaches, and you feel faint, and you become weak. And to get rid of this feeling, you now have to eat more sugar to take away that feeling. And so you put on weight, and your personality goes up and down because you have these rapid swings in the level of your blood sugar. And so you're always eating and always feeling weak and always getting moody, because when your blood sugar goes too low, you feel bad. And when the blood sugar goes high and remains there, you get diabetes. So those who eat a lot of sugar with no fiber, that is refined foods, tend to get fat, develop diabetes, but before that, they get rapid mood swings. When you eat sugar connected with fiber, then there's a slow absorption, a slow rise in the blood sugar. You never feel funny. The pancreas is not overstimulated, so that your insulin levels are low and not too high. And you don't put on weight, and you don't develop diabetes. Now let me illustrate this fiber problem. If I want to eat an orange, one orange, let's say it contains 100 calories of energy, but it contains a lot of fiber. So as I eat the one orange, the fiber swells up in me because I'm eating the whole orange except the skin. And therefore, I can just about manage to eat one orange, and I'm satisfied, one or two. But suppose I want to have a glass of orange juice. When I squeeze one orange, I get that amount of juice. I can hardly drink just that. So I'm going to need to squeeze 5 oranges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to fill up the glass. And as I fill up the glass with the juice of 5 oranges, I now drink 500 calories. And the more calories I drink, the more I put on weight. Because the juice will never fill me up until I have drunken a good glass of orange juice. But the price I pay is that I have taken in more calories, and if I do this every day, I will get fat. But it is very hard for me to sit down at one time and eat 5 oranges. Therefore, what should you do? Eat the orange. Don't squeeze the juice all the time. Eat the orange. Then you will get the juice plus the fiber plus all the other things in the orange. You'll be satisfied. You'll get all your vitamin C, but you will not get fat. The same thing for apple. Rather than living on apple juice, eat the apple. It is very easy to eat the juice of 10 apples. Easy. But it is very hard to sit down and eat 10 apples. So by eating the fruit with the fiber, you enjoy health, but you do not overeat. And so that goes with all fiber. Fiber in fruits, plants are filled with fiber, and grains are filled with fiber. Let us take a grain of wheat. Here is the kernel of the grain. In the kernel of the grain, we have the white part, which is the endosperm. That is starch plus protein. Attached to the endosperm, we have the germ. The germ. When you take the germ away, you sell it as wheat germ. You pay extra for the wheat germ. But actually, the wheat germ was taken from the wheat kernel. Now that is rich in vitamins and minerals and protein. Around the endosperm, we have the bran, that brown covering that covers the wheat. That has in fiber, minerals, and vitamins. And around everything now, we have the husk. We can't digest that. That is a whole wheat. In order to help us to make our food pretty, the manufacturers take away the husk, rightly so, because really we can't chew that, it's too tough. And that leaves the whole wheat, which when you grind, you have whole wheat flour with all the nutrients, starch, proteins, vitamins, and minerals, the germ in everything. But because we don't like the brown color of the wheat, we now take away the bran and we polish it, strip away the bran, and we sell the bran as all bran. Extra cost, but it was already here in the wheat in the first place. And if you ate the wheat kernel, you would get the bran, which is where all the fiber is. And then we take away the germ, we take away the bran, and then we leave the endosperm with diminished protein and the starch, and then we have that now to make our white bread. Now the white bread has in goodness, but to make the bread extra white, we then bleach it to make it really white, and we take away some of the goodness. We have nice white flour to make nice white bread, which has no bran. But of course, when we eat a lot of white products, white flour products, we become constipated. We're going to talk of that in a moment. And because we have bleached the wheat, we now have to enrich it. And so on the packets you see enriched flour. And by enriching it, we add back to the flour the vitamins which we took away in the first place. We send it back and say it is now enriched. And foolish people think they're really getting a bargain. But it can never be as rich as when it was whole. Now, why do I go through all this to talk about fiber? Very important. It helps to limit the amount of food you eat and make you stop eating before you eat too much. Now, as the fiber travels along the intestine and the sugars are released, the fiber is left alone until we get to the colon. As the fiber comes into the colon, devoid of nutrients, it absorbs water. And the water becomes attached to the fiber, and as the water is attached, so the fiber swells up. And as the fiber swells, it pushes against the wall of the colon and stretches it. And as the wall of the colon is stretched like an elastic, and you let the elastic go, the walls fly back to its normal position, and as the walls fly back, it squeezes out the feces. Now, if there is not this stretching, the feces will never move forward. It just stays there, for the feces have no bulk, small volume. It just hangs around, and the bacteria in the colon break down the fiber into toxins that damage the lining of the colon, and the toxins are absorbed into the bloodstream to poison the other cells of the body, because the fiber hangs around too long and allows it to be broken down by the millions of bacteria in the colon. And then the colon absorbs the water. And so the stool becomes very tough, small bulk, very thin, rather than very large. And so large feces contain a lot of fiber which promote emptying of the rectum. So the more fiber you eat, the easier it is to defecate, the easier it is to come through the anus, because if it is dry, constipated, you have to push to generate the pressure to push out the feces. But in generating a strong pressure to push out the feces, there are veins in the walls of the colon. And if you push hard enough, these veins, like the veins on the back of my hand, we push them out. And the veins come out through the anus, and that we call a hemorrhoid or a pile, a blood vessel that comes out like a bunch of grapes, and they bleed. And so we bleed from the anus, and they irritate the anus. And then the doctor now has to go in and cut them out or inject an oil to dry them up. And they only came out and troubled us because there was no fiber or water in the diet. Now, if we don't have any hemorrhoids, as we push through the anus, then the wall of the colon tears, and you get a little tear. The mucosa rips open, and then you get a long sore, which is called a fissure. And it is very painful to defecate. Then you really are in trouble, because now the doctor has to give you laxatives, to give you a kind of diarrhea, so you won't have to defecate properly until the fissure heals. Now, if you don't develop a fissure, but after a few months of really straining to pass out hard stools which contain no fiber, then every time you generate a pressure in the colon or in the rectum, you form a little balloon. A piece of the mucosa pushes out, like blowing up a balloon. And that little sac is called a diverticulum, a little basket. And then feces get inside. And when the feces get inside, they can't come out. So the feces hangs around in the diverticuli, rots, produces toxins, and then you get diverticulitis, pain, bleeding, pus. And one day, the diverticulum bursts, and the infected feces rush out into your abdomen, and then you develop peritonitis, emergency surgery, and the doctor cuts out a part of your colon. All because there was no fiber. So with absent fiber, Your bowel habit falls once every 3 days, once a week, predisposes you to rotting with hemorrhoids, fissures, diverticulum, diverticulitis, possibly peritonitis. And the chemicals which are there year after year irritate the lining of the colon and one day predisposes to a cancer. So you get tumors. Especially if the residue in your feces is made up of animal food with a lot of saturated fats and cholesterol. When they're broken down here, they produce irritants. Those who eat a lot of fiber hardly develop these problems, for the fiber serves to sweep out the intestines, push everything along, for as the walls are stretched by the fiber, then the walls are stimulated to contract and squeeze the intestinal contents from the stomach down to the rectum and finally to the outside. Question, yes?
Is colonic irrigation an option in there?
All right, good. Is colonic irrigation an option? For healthy people, an enema, all right? For those who are not quite sure, an enema means putting fluid through the anus up into the rectum and colon in order to wash out the contents. Now, you have feces all the way from the rectum, right across, up here, the descending colon, across the transverse colon, down the ascending colon, until you come to the appendix on the right side. All of that is feces. But over here it's liquid, and over here it is solid, because all the water has been absorbed. So you can never clean your colon. It doesn't matter if you wash it for the next 10 years. As long as you are eating, the colon will always be filled with feces. Always. But the walls of the colon are designed to cope with bacteria and feces. It's designed that way. Now, as long as you eat well, the colon does its own sweeping, because you have the fiber, and it just sweeps you out. So normal people who have good diets and normal function do not need to have an artificial sweeping. But for those who have developed bad habits and cannot go to the bathroom once every 3 days, once a week, some once every 2 weeks. Now, after a while, it is very hard to evacuate well. And sometimes in some patients, we really have to help them. And you have to put on a glove, put in a finger, 2 fingers, put in a spoon, and you spoon out the feces to make them free so that they can go. Or you do an enema, dissolve the feces, and help them to evacuate while they are learning and reteaching their colon how to work again by changing their diet. So for those who are in trouble or who have educated their colon the wrong way, an enema and irrigation does have a place. For others who don't have that problem, I really don't see a place for it. And some of my friends who are opening businesses have often asked me, Don, let's try on you. Now, I'd love to help them. But because I know I'm working well, I just say, when I have a problem, I will come. But until then, I just do my own thing. So I hope that takes care of the enema problem without injuring the business and the intake of those who have a business in that way. But I really must tell the truth. I don't want to take away your economic assets. There was a question? No. All right. So now, fiber. Plant. Lots and lots and lots and lots. Animal. animal has no fiber. And so people who eat only animal, they're constipated. You don't really have to ask them, are you constipated? Even if they try to lie their way out of it, you know they are constipated. However, if they eat a lot of vegetables with the animal, then the fiber in the vegetables help to sweep out the small volume protein. So those who eat a lot of meat need to balance it with a lot of fiber, and then things are not so bad. Those who eat just plant never have a problem with defecation because there's so much fiber there. So they defecate more often, and the ease of defecation is really wonderful. Minerals. About the same. Good value in both. Water. Plant. Lots and lots and lots and lots of water. Animal, a smaller amount. Because every cell contains water. But the plants just contain more water because they have nothing to fill up the cells except water. Leave the phytochemicals for the time being. Let me talk about something first. Free radicals. We talked about free radicals. Free radicals. Free radicals are those substances which capture an electron and which are absorbed into your body and injure your organs. Free radicals. Plants contain no free radicals. None at all. But animal contains loads, largely because of the LDL with the extra electron. So no free radicals in plants. These destroy and produce disease. They are present here. The phytochemicals are the antioxidants, which destroy free radicals so that the free radicals do not have a chance to produce disease. These fight against those and keep you free from disease. Plants? Filled with phytochemicals, filled. Animal? Zero. So there are no antioxidants in animal, just free radicals to produce problems. Plants, no free radicals to produce disease, but filled with phytochemicals to protect you from any free radicals that might get into your body because of radiation or chemicals in the food. Those who eat just plant hardly have any cancer of the bowel. Those who eat just animal have the highest incidence. And those who eat equal quantities of plant and animal have in between. That's just the laws of nature. Now, those are the good things. Let's quickly now talk about the other things that the animal world offers us, which the plant world doesn't offer us at all. What sort of things are unique to animal food that plant food doesn't offer us? Now we have to go to the way in which animals are fed. Those who have good business sense want to have a quick turnover. Their investment must bring returns in the shortest possible time and maximum return. So if I want to grow a chicken and I have to wait for a few weeks until it grows from a chicken to a fowl, I want to shorten that period and be able to sell it certainly by 6 weeks. And I want my chicken to become an adult in 6 weeks, when normally it takes much longer. If I were allowed, and I'm selling humans, I would do the same thing. Allow my child, my baby, to become like an 18-year-old in 3 years. I can't afford to wait for 18 years. Speed up business. So, what I would do to the human being, in the brain, my pituitary at the base of my brain produces growth hormone. And the growth hormone switches on at regular times according to the information stored in the genes. If, as a baby, the growth hormone is secreted too rapidly because of a tumor in my pituitary gland, the growth hormone concentration in my child's blood will become so high that he'll become a giant. And even when he's 3 years old, he'll look as if he's 10. And by the time he gets to 15, he is about many feet tall. Quick growth. Also, when my adrenal gland produces cortisol, if I produce too much cortisol by my adrenal gland, I will grow very quickly and very obese. And with that, I will develop high blood pressure. Cortisol will give me diabetes. It will give me osteoporosis. It will give me acne. It will make my muscles paralyzed and myopathy, etc., etc., etc. And too much cortisol will not only make me obese, but it'll kill me from these diseases. It's a very dangerous thing to have too much cortisol. Now, you give my chicken some growth hormone in the food, some cortisol, and to make sure that he doesn't die from any germs before I'm ready to sell him, then I fill him up with antibiotics. Now, he doesn't really have an infection, but I want to make sure he doesn't die in the 6 weeks. So I fill him up. And when I kill him, now he's big and plump, but really my chicken is quite young. He's still a child, but looking like an adult. The flesh is filled with these hormones. And when I have him in the coop and I kill him by whatever method, the adrenal glands, by now you know it is sitting on top of the kidneys, pours out with the stress and the fright and the anticipation a lot of adrenaline. Now, if my adrenal glands has a tumor which produces too much adrenaline, it will give me high blood pressure, it will give me diabetes, I'll end up with a stroke or a heart attack. And at the moment of death, the chicken body is filled with adrenaline, and it stays there. And so when I eat my chicken, I get generous amounts of these hormones and adrenaline, and I take it into my body. And if you feed it to me as a child, then if I'm a girl, you will not surprise that my periods come rather early, 7, 8, because the cortisol is making me mature at a very fast rate. And you give me my growth hormone, and I really become quite large, and I grow rapidly. And so the same things that these hormones do in the chicken, it does in me. And so you find in countries where they eat a lot of animal, the boys and girls grow very fast. They become adults in body while they remain children in mind. And that is one of the prices we have paid for the kinds of foods we have been eating. And our children eat enormous quantities of antibiotics and hormones. And we wonder why sometimes they behave the way they behave. Now, I do this not just for the chickens, but I do this for the cows. I give them the same hormones in food. So, the flesh foods give me a number of diseases. Due to hormones, which are not present here. Plants do not give you disease. They are filled with phytochemicals. Now, animals have bodies like ours.
Question, what about genetically modified plants?
All right? Now, that takes us into another ball court. When they produce corn, we can now produce corn which contains trout flavor. Because you insert a trout gene into the corn's gene, and you get it with that kind of flavor. So we can mix up anything we want nowadays. It will not give you diseases like this. In fact, we don't really know what will happen. We're waiting to find out. Because human beings have a propensity to take over God's arrangement, and we do funny things. Simply because I don't know why we can't wait to make corn grow the way corn was designed to grow. But then seeing that not only are we modifying the genes of plants with animals, but we're also mixing animals with animals and producing new breeds of animals called chimeras. One animal bred with another. And now we're even mixing human genes with animal genes. They're not on the market yet because they kill them early. When I was in South Africa in February, we had some big news on the paper, and they had a large picture of a human clone. It wasn't one of animal and human, but that is what they're doing. So that in the laboratory, we now have mice in whom animal-human testes have been grafted, so that mice can now produce human sperm and human ova. And you put those two together and you get a human clone whose parents are mice. But we leave that for the time being and come back to what they're doing with genetically modified plants. We do not yet know the outcome, but then God will deal with that when the time comes. Infections. Because animals' bodies are similar to ours, we share the same kinds of infections. And so what goes in an animal by mutation when it comes into us can cause disease. So a lot of our diarrheal diseases, Salmonella, Shigella, Campylobacter, all of them come from animal into us. Tuberculosis comes from animals into us, not just by breathing it in, but by eating tuberculous germs, we get intestinal tuberculosis, amoebic dysentery. All those diseases are transmitted from animal to us. Trichinosis, and all the worms that infect animals, we eat them and they bring disease. Of course, there is mad cow disease caused by this new thing that is neither a virus nor a bacterium. We don't know what it is. But we have diseases in the human family which are very similar to mad cow disease and in all probability connected. So as we eat largely of animal food, we partake of their infections, which don't come through us through plant, but once again, fatal diseases are transmitted. And finally, we eat their urea, and we eat their uric acid. Plants have no urea and no uric acid, so as we eat a lot of this, the urea builds up in our blood and we come with gout. So we develop gout. And that largely comes from eating the breakdown products contained in blood. For once you eat animal, you must eat blood unless you are Jewish. And God said to the Jews, I will allow you to eat some flesh, but first, no fat, no blood. Now God knew that once you drain the animal of fat and blood, the flesh is tasteless and you want to vomit. But it is the blood and the fat that makes it tasty. But it is the fat, the saturated fats, that give you your heart attacks and your strokes and your other diseases. And it is all these other wastes in the blood that makes it nice. But we're eating waste. For our own bodies put out urea and uric acid, it doesn't want it. And when we eat these quantities in animal, we are just giving our bodies an extra burden to get rid of the animal's waste plus our own. And in that way, we are depleting the body's stores of energy and drawing on those stores to get rid of waste when we could have used that energy to promote life and strength. Because our energy stores are not infinite. If you draw upon them too much and they run out, it hastens our death. I could go on to say more, but I'll stop. How do you shop? When you go shopping for food, I'm sorry?
They used to say chicken and fish was the better option to eat. Now I hear that they're both the same.
Sure.
Is that
Well, cows and chicken are about the same. They're talking of white meat and lean meat. Whether it's white or it's lean, it's still filled with saturated fat. When you don't take the fat away, it's even more. But the very best you can make of lean meat, though it looks red, it still contains lots of fat between the fibers. It's invisible to the eye, and so with white meat. Now, what makes fish best of all is that it contains a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which are very good. But the fact is, you don't really have to go to fish to get good omega-3 fatty acids. You also get it in plants. And from plants, you make your omega-3 fatty acids. For though it is good in fish, yet fish comes with other problems. Cholesterol, diseases. The fish are prone to develop all the problems that we put into the sea: radioactive wastes, factory wastes, chemicals, sewage, and all kinds of rubbish. And who eats them? The fish. And then those chemicals and mercury and cadmium come back to us in the fish, and then we have the disease. Because those chemicals accumulate in our fatty tissue. And nowadays, mothers are warned not to give their young children fish because of the high levels of mercury poisoning in the children. But you say, oh, my fish, I catch them from the deep waters. Do you know how far a fish swims? When you catch the fish in the deep waters, where has he come from? And in whose sewers has he eaten? So it's nonsense about catching fish in the deep sea. Whether you catch it near or far, the waters have become so polluted that it brings problems. Some years ago, in the Bering Straits between Siberia and USSR and Alaska, the Russians, unbeknown to us, had dumped some of their nuclear plants. And we knew that because the incidence of cancer in the seals who inhabit those waters increased tenfold. Cancer because of radioactive exposure. And when we eat animal containing whether hormones or extra adrenaline or antibiotics or nuclear waste or sewage, how can we hope to escape the consequences? And is this really how we spend our money when we're buying food for ourselves and for our children? When we go to the supermarket, do we use our heads in deciding what to buy to give them the best advantage? Or do we simply follow taste and give those things which, at best, leave us with a heritage of disease and, at worst, kills us early? I leave you to ponder that question.
How bad is milk and eggs?
Milk and eggs. Dairy products. Clearly, the more the animal population becomes diseased, then the more those things will become unsafe. For those who grow hens in a rural setting and who are not fed by the artificial food, those eggs are healthier. The other kinds of eggs carry the same things and salmonella in them. But those free-range hens, their eggs are far superior to the other eggs. Now, in areas where such eggs are available, and in areas where the diet depends on those things, and they are not affluent, then the policy is eat the best that is available where you are. Eat the best. But the time will come, I'm sure, when eggs will become quite unsafe. The same with milk. Generally, milk is infected. That's why you need to pasteurize it. But even pasteurized milk, when you leave it in the fridge for a few days, the bacterial count will go up. And if you leave it long enough in the fridge, unless you freeze it, it will get sour, because all milk contains bacteria, but the pasteurizing level allows a certain minimum level of bacteria, but it is not pure. So once again, we open ourselves to the danger of diseases transmitted by milk, of which TB is a powerful one. And even if we don't get the disease, the saturated fats which come out are not good for us. And one day, as the animal population really begins to suffer, it will be wise to eliminate milk unless we are living under extreme circumstances when we cannot do better. Adults don't really need milk because we're not growing anymore. But simply because culture has accustomed us to cereal with milk, then of course we continue to the habit. But it isn't vital for health. Cheese, the same thing. Cheese is largely fat, and it is saturated fat. Largely fat. Cheese is about 75% fat.
So I just have a question, maybe talking about fats, about hydrogenation.
Right. Hydrogenation in animal fat, of course, will give you saturated fats. But then we take now the vegetable fat, which has a double bond, and hydrogenation, we add a hydrogen here, and we add a hydrogen here by hydrogenating it. and so we get rid of the double bond. It now becomes a saturated vegetable fat, which really is not healthy. And the other thing that happens when you hydrogenate them, you turn the normal fats from one structural form called a cis configuration, that is, the way the molecule is shaped, and we alter the shape and we turn it into a trans configuration. So from a cis fat, we form a trans fat. Now, trans fat does not work the same as a cis fat. I can't go into the biochemistry of it. The membrane doesn't handle it the same way. It's rather like having a block of bricks. And then in the block of bricks, building your wall, you put a brick shaped that way. These are cis fats, and that's a trans fat. It now opens up an area of vulnerability in the wall of the cell, and so the cell doesn't function well. And the more trans fats you eat, the more you disturb the integrity of your cell membrane and open yourself to cell malfunction. So we try to avoid hydrogenated oils and trans fats, and we try to stick to vegetable fats in moderate quantities, and better still, monounsaturated fats.
Can you have a bit of information on caffeine?
On caffeine? Caffeine is a very powerful drug. One, it's a diuretic. It dehydrates you. Two, it is a stimulant. It arouses the nervous pathways of stimulation by depressing the pathways of inhibition. So it removes those brakes in our brains that says enough, enough. And when the brakes are removed, then the stimulatory pathways go on like a horse who doesn't want to stop. So whatever pathways are stimulated, we just run and run and run, using up all the energy in our body until we become exhausted. But because the caffeine is stimulating us when the body should rest and recover, it can't, because it is being driven. When the energy stores are depleted, then we take more coffee to stimulate further and to depress the brakes even more. So finally, when we become addicted, the heart is racing, the kidneys are overflushing, the nervous system is agitated, we become filled with anxiety, we cannot sleep because the sleep mechanism, the cells in the brain that keep us awake are just driven all the time. They will never switch off, so we cannot rest. And finally, it drives us to exhaustion. Once we become addicted, it's very difficult to break the habit, although it can be broken. All right, our time really is up. But I will leave you with those thoughts, and I want you to ponder them carefully. The Bible says, "Why do you spend money for that which is not bread? Why do you spend valuable money to hurt yourselves and to go to the grave quicker, when there are other things that can be bought which vitalize you and gives you the maximum returns for your life? Not just physical, but all the things I have been talking about in the body also go on in the brain cells and affect our behavior. And when you combine bad habits of nutrition with bad habits of water drinking or dehydration, and you compound the problem, no wonder we have sicknesses and problems which even the best doctors cannot solve. May I invite you to begin to think about your eating and your drinking and its ultimate effect on brain function, and on your spiritual perception. On Friday, we have a rest tomorrow night. On Friday will be our last talk together. And now I'll try to bring all of these things together so that we can see the whole point of living well. How to live well and get the best out of life while we are alive, so that when the time comes to die, we may die graciously, knowing that we have lived well. And when we see God, he will be able to say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You looked after the gift I gave you, the gift of health, the gift of your body. And because you've looked after it well, by my grace, enter into the joy of thy Lord." May this be our ultimate experience. And I hope to see you on Friday night for our concluding remarks on these aspects relating to health. Thank you.